Welcome to Marketplace Tech Bytes. I'm Lily Jamali. We have reached the mid-year mark of 2024, believe it or not. So this week we are breaking format and taking stock of the last 6 months in tech. What were the most impactful stories? What were the most underreported stories? And of course, what was the biggest tech flub of the year so far? For more on that, I'm joined by Maria Curie. She's a tech policy reporter at Axios, and she joins me now from Washington. Hey, Maria.
Hey, Lily. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for rolling with us on a different show that we're trying out today. We're very excited about it. All right. So, Maria, we're going to start with what would you say was the most impactful moment in tech so far this year? There's a lot of options. Really curious what you're thinking about.
I think the most impactful moment was probably a Senate Judiciary hearing where we had the biggest tech CEOs come and testify on children's online safety. There was a specific moment during that hearing where Mark Zuckerberg stood up and faced a crowd of parents who have lost their kids to social media impacts, or that's, what they would say. And he apologized after Senator Josh Hawley had kind of egged him on to do that. And it was a really impactful moment. And it's just one inflection point of a broader story that's been happening all year in terms of, more increased attention among regular Americans in terms of the impact of social media on young people. So that's one I would flag. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that moment, this was in January, so right at the start of the year, and that moment that you described with Mark Zuckerberg being goaded on by Josh Hawley to turn around and face the audience definitely got a lot of the headlines. There was another moment that really struck me when I was watching it. It was from Mark Zuckerberg's, who of course is the CEO of Meta, which runs Instagram and Facebook, when he was giving his opening statement. Let's play that moment.
With so much of our lives spent on mobile devices and social media, it's important to look into the effects on teen mental health and well-being. I take this very seriously. Mental health is a complex issue, and the existing body of scientific work has not shown a causal link between using social media and young people having worse mental health outcomes. A recent National Academies of Science report evaluated over 300 studies and found that research, quote, did not support the conclusion that social media causes changes in adolescent mental health at the population level, end quote.
And I just remember being so struck by that moment because while there may not be a definitive causal link, I think a lot of parents are having a very different experience, are watching their kids really suffering. And it's hard to deny that there is some sort of correlation between the rise in social media use and what kids are going through. And it's not just kids, it's adults too.
Right. I think that just based on personal experience as adults, it's not hard to believe that it does have an impact on mental health. And it kind of reminds me of, the Surgeon General's op-ed in the New York Times that just came out last month. And he starts that op-ed out by saying, we can't wait for the perfect information to come out to start taking some form of action. And he goes out and calls for a warning label on social media websites. That's after he's already made all sorts of other policy recommendations that take congressional action. And surprisingly, even the warning label takes congressional action. So that's, who knows if that'll happen anytime soon. But in terms of the mental health conversation, I would also just note that on the other side of this, there are a lot of young people that are part of the LGBTQ community that also rely on social media platforms for their mental health in a positive way in terms of building community. And so it's been a tricky debate. And lawmakers have had to consider the pros and the cons of social media on young people.
I'm really glad you bring up that important example because there is a support system out there for kids who might feel marginalized in their own homes or in their own communities that is only accessible for some by way of the internet. So I'm glad you brought that up. And I just want to sort of cap this off by saying that, these hearings often get a lot of criticism as being an exercise in optics. And while they may be that to some extent, I've been really interested talking to various lawmakers over these last few months, including most recently Attorney General Rob Bonta here in California, who said that hearing that we just saw that clip from has helped him move forward with social media related legislation here in California. So it is making a difference. And I think there's more to come, but still no federal legislation has been passed. And it's important to note that as well. All right. Well, on to our next part of this show, which is the biggest tech flub of the year. So many choices, but there's kind of an obvious candidate here, Maria.
Yeah, this
so
one
I'll
was
let
easy.
you take it.
Yeah, how can we forget when OpenAI rolled out a new feature and it sounded exactly like Scarlett Johansson's voice after she had explicitly said, please don't use my voice. And then you had Sam Altman saying it wasn't her voice and, but then named the movie Her, which she starred in. Anyway.
Yeah, you got me in some hot water on social media, I have to say, by the way,
I
because
saw that,
it wasn't her voice. It did
Yeah.
sound very reminiscent of her, but it wasn't her. And somebody tweeted at me and said, it's not her.
I saw that.
Definitely not her. And I was like, yeah, I mean, to be honest, I didn't think it sounded exactly like Scarlett Johansson, but there was definitely, the tenor of the voice was very similar. There's no doubt about that.
Absolutely. And I think a line was crossed with an individual, and that's really what matters.
Yeah, well, let's play a clip from that event. This was back in May when they did a demo.
Once upon a time, in a world not too different from ours, there was a robot named Byte. Byte was a curious robot, always exploring.
Started the story, but I want a little bit more emotion in your voice, a little bit more drama.
Got it. Let's add some drama.
Oh my goodness. Well, it's funny because we were talking at that time about how this demo, and they asked the AI voice, the voice tool on ChatGPT to, which they were launching, to tell them a bedtime story. And what ends up happening is it sounds good for the moment, and then we end up with this ScarJo debacle just a couple of days later. And then on top of that, Google's Gemini AI overview ends up getting into some hot water as well. The Verge wrote about this with a subhead that I thought was very funny. Google's AI overviews feature is delivering incorrect answers faster than ever. So it was just a lot of egg on everybody's face for a while there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, to us, it's a flub. And I'm sure to the tech executives that are behind all of this, it's also a flub. But people have short memories. Eventually, they'll move on. And it's kind of in line with whether it's the generative AI search function for Google or it's this OpenAI feature. It kind of just plays along the lines of what they've always said they're going to do, which is kind of use the public as the test bed and testing things out widely and broadly, and then rolling things back as they need to. They will keep moving at a really fast speed, regardless of these little flubs. Yeah,
I think you're right about that. And then it's hard not to draw comparisons to social media and how the public has been guinea pigs for all of that. And it's taken a while to really understand the ramifications of that. When you're, doing this with an AI overview, you can end up giving people wrong information about, polling places and other things related to the election, which is coming up. So their stakes are really high. But another good insight on your part about that was kind of always part of the plan, wasn't it? Mm-hmm. All right. Well, finally, very excited to hear about what you think is the most underreported story, or maybe something that's been reported, but maybe didn't get the due attention it deserves. What do you think here?
I think the most underreported story is kind of the intersection between the development of AI and the impact that has on climate and electricity use. We do have some reporting on it out there, but it certainly hasn't been the top discussion point when it comes to AI. And I think that's in part because innovation is such a huge priority across the board in the federal government on both sides of the aisle, that sometimes these other conversations about what the impact of innovating so quickly might be. So that is one that I would flag.
Yeah, I mean, when you actually stack up the amount of energy that's used with a chatbot query against a Google search, it's significantly more. It's something like 10 times more power is used when you're searching in ChatGPT or Google Gemini. Really interesting article just out from the Wall Street Journal, an exclusive that I would definitely direct people's attention to, and we're going to post this. The largest tech companies have reportedly been trying to secure deals to buy nuclear power directly from owners of those nuclear power plants. It really shows the necessity of ready access to energy. And, I think on the flip side of that, that can have a real impact on reliability and cost of power for the rest of us. This is something that's very near and dear to me as a reporter living in California for the last several years. We had rolling blackouts in 2020 here on 2 days in August. That was the first time we'd had that happen in about 2 decades. Back in the good old days of Enron coming in and helping deregulate our electricity markets here. But we've seen stories mostly, I would say, in the crypto mining context, where you get these crypto mining facilities setting up in a community, and suddenly power costs a lot more for residents because they get a quota. So I think this is a very real issue with very real impacts potentially on real people.
Yeah, and in terms of what the government is doing right now, the biggest thing that I could point to is the Biden administration's executive order that does have some directives for the Department of Energy on these things, and it's really a fact-finding mission in terms of how this explosion in AI might have adverse effects on the planet, but also how AI could help, energy efficiency and make things more reliable, make the grid more reliable. And so they're exploring both aspects of it. They're convening utilities and regulators at the state level. They're offering grants for the most efficient uses of power and AI. And so it's something, but I would also note that, in an election year, some of these environmental things, they're not much, and even those could be rolled back under a potential Trump administration. And so for now, I don't expect that any actions will be taken to kind of meet the climate goals that the United States has set for itself.
Yeah, and you use the term fact-finding mission, which I think just underscores we don't have a whole lot of information about what some of these facilities consume. We're starting to just now get the data on how much power AI, eats up, and what that means for the rest of us. So one to watch, and we'll be posting that Wall Street Journal article that I mentioned on our website, marketplacetech.org. Thank you so much, Maria, for being here to help us cap off the midpoint of the year.
Thanks, Lily.
That was Maria Puri of Axios. And thanks to all of you for watching Marketplace Tech Bytes. Make sure to like this video and subscribe to us. We are at Marketplace APM on YouTube. Jesus Alvarado produced this episode, and I'm Lily Jamali. This is APM.